Hello, weary travellers, night owls, and midnight marauders. This is MrFreakyStory, and I will be your host this evening on Amityville Horror Radio. Tonight's tales are about that eerie room in some of our homes, the basement. First up, The Man in the Basement, written and narrated by DanieDreadful. Enjoy.
We as humans fear things we cannot see. Ghosts, spirits, demons, angels. And for some, we fear the dark. Not the dark itself per se, more so of what may or may not be lurking in the shadows. Nyctophobia is real. You can be in your happiest, most familiar place, but turn off the lights, and your mind starts playing tricks on you. Our minds tell us that we're not alone, and someone or something is waiting to make its move. This irrational fear, as some may refer to it as, has stayed with me well into my adult years. Do I still sleep with a nightlight? Must I have my phone with me at all times in case I need the flashlight? You bet. It all stems from the basement. I've always called it the haunted basement when telling this story, and not the haunted house. The reason being is the house as a whole was not the problem. I never felt anything odd in my room or the living room or kitchen. It was only when I entered that dreaded basement that I felt an overwhelming sense of fear. Now, I don't mean the kind of fear like you get from watching a scary movie or riding a roller coaster. No. This was something else. Why wouldn't you just avoid the basement, you ask? Well, I would have, but the washer and dryer were down there, and a girl had to wash her clothes. Now let me start by saying this wasn't your typical modern-day basement. This was the basement of a house that was built in 1900. It seemed as though some of the previous tenants did not get their eviction notices, especially the man with the mustache, as we refer to him anyway. I can't say just how many spirits occupied the basement, but I know for sure there were at least 3. In this retelling of my experience, we're just going to focus on one, but perhaps we can revisit at a later time. The man with the mustache. He was not a good man, not a good man at all. It was the night before picture day. You remember those, right? Everyone had to look their best. Well, in typical Danie fashion, I had failed to plan out my outfit, and of course I realized I had nothing suitable to wear that was clean. Without going into too much detail, let's just say I had to take care of myself growing up, so asking my mother to throw a load of laundry in was not an option. It was up to me and my 9-year-old self to man up, so to speak, and make my way to the basement. Mind you, at this point, I had not had any experiences with any of these spirits. The basement just freaked me out. I knew I had good reason for it, I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. Until that night. It was approaching 9 p.m. and the dryer buzzed. I ran quickly, grabbed the laundry basket, and headed towards the basement. Before going downstairs, I remember begging my sister to accompany me, but she was a much bigger coward than I was. Instead, she made her excuses. She teased me and told me to stop being a little baby. I rolled my eyes, took a deep breath, and once again started for the basement. Nothing happened when I put the clothes in the washer, so I don't really know why I was so terrified to go down there for a second time. It must have been my gut feeling going into overdrive. It was a chilly September night, but the frigid temperature coming from the lower level of the house was far too cold, and it did not feel right. The stairs to the basement were extremely narrow and slightly curved at the bottom. It was basically a death trap. On a separate occasion, I almost fell, but I was saved by another spirit or something. It grabbed the back of my sweatshirt and saved my life, but that's another story for another night. Anyways, as I was saying, the stairs were extremely narrow, and although there were lights, they were very, very dim. This was the late 90s, so cell phones didn't really exist and we weren't glued to them like we are now. Back then, we relied on good old flashlights and not the ones on our phone, but of course I failed to grab one. I remember contemplating going back upstairs to get one, but I figured I'd be quick. I also didn't want to endure the teasing wrath of my sister. But thinking about it now, I would have taken the teasing over what happened to me that night, any day. Carefully, I headed down the stairs into the cold, dimly lit basement. I rounded the corner and smelled something that could only be described as burning rubber. I immediately freaked out, thinking my clothes caught on fire, or that something else was burning. That put a bit of pep in my step, so to speak, and I ran towards the dryer. There was no smoke, no fire, thank God. I mean, my dad was a smoker, so I chalked it up to lingering cigarette smoke just to calm my nerves. But thinking about it, he wasn't home that night, nor had he been down to the basement in ages. I was more freaked out than normal, so I swiftly grabbed my clothes from the dryer and threw them into the basket. Now, next to the washer and dryer was a very weird, tiny room. I have no idea what it was for or why it was even there. It was honestly so small and looked so out of place. I guess it was used as an extra storage room, but it just felt wrong, for lack of a better term. The lights would never turn on no matter how many times we changed the bulb. The landlord said he'd fix the electrical, but it was pointless since there was no use for the room anyway. Although there were quite a few old purses and luggage in there, I guess I always just assumed it was the belongings of the family who lived downstairs from us. All I knew was it wasn't mine to touch, and I hated that small, weird room. As I was gathering my clothes and trying to keep my composure, the smoke smell grew stronger, and a buzzing sound was coming from that room. By this point, I was literally shaking because the buzzing noise was coming from that same light fixture that did not work. The buzzing continued, but the light itself was not on, until it was. I dropped the basket of clothes and stood there frozen. I tried so hard to convince myself that the landlord had finally fixed the light. Like I said earlier, it was a very old house and electricity can be wonky. At least that's what I kept telling myself anyway. I peered into the room, and at that moment the light turned off again. It was so dark, it felt as though I was staring into the abyss. There was nothing, just darkness. I wish I would have had the courage to run the fuck upstairs at that point, but my 9-year-old brain could not comprehend what was going on. All I knew was that I felt like I was in imminent danger. This part right here, well, this is where my fear of the dark comes from. The door from the weird room slammed shut. I screamed bloody murder, but no one came down to save me, even to check on me. Was I even screaming? Or did I think I was? Was I just standing there in utter shock and disbelief? No, I had to have been screaming because my throat hurt, I remember that. I bolted for the stairs, and as I did, I felt something grab my leg, but I just kept going until I tripped and scraped my knee. I smelled something that of rust, and I realized my knee must have been bleeding. Also, the burning smell was so pungent now that it felt as though there was a cloud surrounding me. Just as I reached the bottom step, the lights turned off, the exit door closed on me, and there was nothing but pure, utter darkness. I screamed so loudly, but all I could hear was the deafening sound of nothingness. And then I saw him. A man with a crooked, evil grin covered by a dark brown mustache. I will never forget that face, that smell, that look in his eyes. How was I seeing someone if it was so dark? I remember thinking. That look, it was so hateful. He wanted me scared. He wanted me gone out of his basement, perhaps even dead. Tears poured down my cheeks, shaking like a leaf, still yelling and trying to feel my way up the stairs to the exit to no avail. Something felt like it was pulling me back with each step I took toward the exit. At that point, I gave up. I sat at the bottom of the stairs, crying, hoping someone would hear me. Just then, I heard my sister pounding on the door, telling me to stop being an idiot and open the damn door. It was locked. I was screaming that this wasn't a joke. I pleaded for her to call the cops. I remember screaming, "There's a man with a mustache down here trying to kill me. Call the cops." I heard my sister's panicked voice as she tried with all her might to open the door. She knew me well enough to know I would not joke about something like this. Just as she yelled out, "I'm calling the police," the lights turned on. The door unlocked. The man with the mustache vanished. I flew up the stairs, and I must have looked crazy because my sister looked at me with a terrified expression. I told her the entire story as soon as we went upstairs, and we kept the TV on that night, and actually every other night going forward. It took me a very long time to go back down to that basement. Although I hated that basement with every fiber of my being, I still had to wash my laundry. My sister and I came up with a buddy system, and we never went down there alone again. We even went as far as to making sure the other family was home. We knock on the door and just let them know that we were going down into the basement. We never told them the full story, just that the door somehow got jammed and I was left down there, so they were very understanding. Unfortunately for us, that was not the last time we encountered the man with the mustache, but that was the most intense experience either of us had with him. I wanted so badly to believe that my mind was playing tricks on me, that the darkness drove me a little mad. But when my sister saw him the next time, I just thought, well, maybe we're all mad down here. To be continued.
Our next story, A Weird Experience by Dubidos, narrated by Archian.
Alright, I don't know where to start with this, but here I am reading a bunch of people's posts on all kinds, and the last one I read kinda stuck with me and made me remember an event that happened to me. Was reading about alien abductions and stuff. But basically, right, it was a September day around 7 PM or 8. I was 20 years old. It was a pretty average day. Keep in mind, no one but me and my dog were home all day. I lived in a townhouse with my mom and 2 siblings, and her BF, and my dog. That day, I was chilling in my room, which was the basement, and I was just laying in bed, watching YouTube, waiting for a move to come up with a friend, just relaxing. And I remember, I started to get sleepy from just being bored and idle. So I start to doze off with the TV still on and shit. The thing is, I was home alone that day. My dog was the only one with me, but he was upstairs, posted up by the window, like usual. Right, so eventually I doze off, and I start basically seeing myself sleeping in my room. like I'm in third-person codcaster mode in Call of Duty. And I remember trying to move and like wake up because it felt so real. I thought I was still awake, but in the dream or whatever I was in. It's like every time I tried to get up or move my body would just slump over, go limp. And I would try my hardest to move, just an inch, and even a finger, but I couldn't. And every time I would try, I would be stuck in that position, slumped over limp on my bed, in weird positions. Right, so in that state, I remember when I was lying there, stuck. I recall out of nowhere hearing my sister at my door, which is close to my bed. Since my room isn't too big, I hear her call out my name and she's asking for me to open the door because it's her. I still can't move. Then I hear my brother along with her voice say the same thing. Next thing, I know I hear my mom's voice pleading to open the door for them to hurry up and open it. And the thing is, the whole time I thought it was real, because it sounds just like them. It terrified me though. Something about it felt off-putting and not genuine. As I'm stuck there, trying to process what the fuck is going on, I notice that I can still hear my phone going off by my pillow, getting text notifications, and I also can still faintly see the LED colored lights I have on my TV still on, and changing colors as well as hearing the background YouTube video playing. But when I start to realize that the door knocking got harder to the point I thought the door wasn't going to hold up, then, in one sudden second, it stops, and within the state I'm currently in, I close my eyes, and once I did, I started seeing memories I lived through with my family and siblings when we were younger, and I start to cry. I notice memories I either forgot about or that never happened start being played out too. I start feeling drowsy in the dream or whatever it is, and my vision just goes black. It felt like forever, but when I open my eyes again, I see that I'm no longer in a place I recognize at all. It was like a very woody woodland area, with a grassy opening area in the middle, surrounded by more dead winter trees around. I then see my dog, a small white Pomeranian paddle, running towards me, and I bend down as to pick him up, and notice as he's getting closer, it's not my dog, but morphs into some small, about 3 feet tall, I'd say creepy dark black alien-like creature. It looked like a raisin, honestly, like that's how its skin looked, and very moist looking. Once I notice it's not my dog, it's too late, because it latches onto my right wrist and starts like taking me over. But while that's happening, I get the urge to fight back, to not let this go on, because I wanna live. I was terrified. It then overpowers me, and is on like my chest, on top of me, while I'm on the floor laying on my back. It's still latched onto my wrist, by the way, but I remember, I start choking it out by the neck, and turn it over now. It's on its back to the floor like I was. I end up overpowering it, and once I do, using all my strength, I wake up. First thing I notice is a very sharp pain in my wrist, where it was latched to. It's tender as well. My whole body was shaking, and I had goosebumps, but I look at my phone and see that it's only been like 10 minutes in real life, but it felt like eternity. I then go upstairs, shook and scared, and find my dog just laying by the door to my basement. He jumps and is ecstatic to see me, like he was scared too. I immediately take him with me and go outside. I also call my siblings to just make sure they are all good, and they were all fine. Everything felt so real at one point. I didn't know if it was a dream or not. I honestly thought I was like schizophrenic at one point, because of when I kept hearing my family members' voices. I told my friend about it, and he thought I just had sleep paralysis, but I've never had that in my life, ever. This stuck with me till now. I don't know. Feel free to in my knowledge what you guys think about this.
Up next, Our Other Basement by Decorative Gentleman, narrated by only Coyote.
Our house has 2 basements, one under the other. The lower one's a secret, but Pa told me all about it. I ain't never seen it, but Pa says it's where he keeps the shine. I ain't never seen a jug of that neither, but it's probably best I don't. That way I'd have plausible deniability if the law ever came round. The law's a rival. That's what Pa says. He says if they found out what was in that basement, the one under the normal one, our whole world would come crashing down. I don't want no trouble for Pa, but the secret? I ain't never been much good at keeping them. Pa only told me about the moonshine on account of me hearing screams below when I was in the top basement searching for a file for the chainsaw. Pa said it was my Uncle Ralph cutting his hand on a broken jug. I like Ralph. He's a generous sort and modest to boot. When we started getting new horses at the house, Pa said it was Ralph who gave them. Now Ralph, he don't want no thanks or nothing, so he told me that he ain't had a hand in them horses making their way to our possession. Pa must be using them horses right too. Every time he gets a new one, I hear another voice in the secret basement. More employees for the shine business, I guess. Pa's awful smart. There's a horse trail that passes right through our land. With him taking the shine by horse, the law would never suspect a thing. Well, they wouldn't have. But like I said, I ain't never been too good at keeping secrets. I only told my best friends about the secret basement. Just Little Paul, Ira Blanton, and Eddie Wallace. I was proud of my pa. He weren't just a mechanic, he's a bona fide outlaw tycoon. One of them 3 must have told, 'cause 2 weeks later, we had a whole mess of lawmen at our house. I remember exactly what Pa said to him, 'cause it put a wrinkle in my brow. Y'all don't understand. They ain't what they seem. Take me to jail. I'll confess to whatever you want, but whatever you do, do not let them free. I never seen my pa so scared before. But them lawmen didn't listen. I seen them bring up 4 men from the secret basement. A torture dungeon, the lawmen called it. Right off, they pegged my pa for a murderer. Asked him where the bodies were. Screamed at him. Pa just looked at them 4 men with a real wide-eyed look, and then, with a shiver in his voice, he said, "The bodies are all around us." That was that. They took Pa away, and each of them 4 men stole one of our horses. The white one, the red one, the black, and the pale.
Our final story. I found a strange VHS in my basement. Written by OneMap_Dude1. Narrated by yours truly. I've been told this is the place to post mysterious stuff and get answers, which is good because answers are what I need right now. So I live in one of those older suburban developments outside Toronto. You know, the ones they built up in the 1970s for the poorer people to move into. I've lived at that house for my whole life, and that includes my childhood. Growing up in the early 2000s with rather frugal parents, my childhood memories were of watching movies on VHS, playing hidden object games on Windows XP, and so on. Of the many movies I remember watching as a young boy, one of them was certainly not Frankie Pig Visits Niagara Falls. I discovered the obscure film when I was cleaning out the basement. My parents had moved out some time ago and had left me the old house, and they wanted me to make one last check for anything they might want to bring to the new house. When I was searching under the house, I found a box in the corner of the room labelled Kids Movies. I opened it and began to look at some of the VHS tapes. Most of them I had fond memories of. VeggieTales, Peter Pan, the Berenstain Bears. Some I just found weird as a child, like those obscure Christian films like Bible Man. Out of all these tapes, only one really stuck out to me as unfamiliar. The aforementioned Frankie Pig Meets Niagara Falls. According to the back of the case, it was made in 1992 by a Canadian film studio called Funbox Entertainment. Odd. Most of the cassettes I had were from the late 90s, around the time my older brother was born. Intrigued, I read the synopsis. From the studio that bought you, Frankie Pig's Big Adventure. Canada's favourite farm friend is back in a feature-length adventure when Farmer Casey lets the farm animals go on a vacation. Troublemaking Frankie Pig decides to jump ship in Niagara Falls, making friends and learning lessons as he tries to find Farmer Casey and the others. Alright, sounds innocent enough, I thought to myself. Fortunately, I keep my VCR plugged into the TV in case I ever want to feel nostalgic. So I decided to find out what I was missing and loaded the cassette into the machine. So first it starts with the production company logo shining on the screen to that generic sort of synth music. Then another logo for a different company that did the distribution, called Kidscape Distribution Canada. After the logos, the film began with, surprisingly enough, a live action sequence. Here, on the live action, but obviously cheaply made farm, we are introduced to Farmer Casey, a friendly country girl who runs Fiddlesticks Farm. She loudly announces to the camera that she's taken the animals on a vacation, and you, the viewer, needs to help her wake them up. One by one, very slowly, we are introduced to the animated animals. Cassidy, the cow, Elizabeth, the horse, Larry, the chicken, and Quincy, the duck. But where's Frankie? Given what we know from the synopsis, that pig's up to no good, so Farmer Casey once again gives us, the viewer, the all-important duty of finding Frankie. And of course we do. He's hiding in the mud, silly pig. Now it's time for Farmer Casey to load the trailer and disembark on our vacation. We make a couple of stops at some Canadian landmarks, where we then learn some basic information at each stop. Then, Frankie turns to the camera and tells us he's ditching the crew when we arrive to Niagara Falls, because that farmer lady is just so boring. So we too join Frankie when he hops off the trailer when nobody's looking, and that's when everything goes to hell. Immediately, the friendly-looking Frankie switches from a cute little pig with a hat to a real man with a distorted pig mask, and the camera quality was significantly distorted by. I paused the tape. What the crap just happened? I asked myself. I stopped watching for a little bit to do some research. I needed to find out what the hell this film was about, so I googled it. Frankie Pig visits Niagara Falls. Nothing pops up. Nothing relevant anyways. Most of it was just some pictures of pigs on Instagram or something, which happened to be named Frankie. So I decided to look up the production company listed, Funbox Entertainment. Immediately, I'm presented with their website, so I click on it. The website is so obviously dated, with crappy vector graphics and pixelated GIFs of various animated characters and the company's motto, creating Canada's premier animations since 1972. There's an option to see all the movies they've produced, and guess what? No mention of Frankie Pig Visits Niagara Falls, or Frankie Pig at all for that matter. The most recent film they're credited with is an animated kids film, their speciality, entitled Horace's Lonely Island, made in 1991. However, there was a number to call at the bottom, so I did. No response, so I decided that before I did any more research, I would finish the film. I sat back on the couch and pressed play. This new, creepy version retained the original, childish voice of Frankie, except now it seemed like he was crying as he spoke, like he was forced to say the words.
"Now I've left those fools, it's time to explore,"
said Frankie. He was standing in a field, very obviously not a set. The camera turned to showcase the skyline of Niagara Falls, lit with night lights. The film quality became more like those creepy found footage films on YouTube somewhere. The camera was behind Frankie, following him as we slowly walked towards the city. The film cuts to Clifton Hill. It's practically midnight, judging from the sky, and the lights of the strip are the only lights. Frankie walks up the street, past several tour buses and tourists, none of whom seem to notice him. It's when he turns onto a side street when I notice he's holding a knife. A woman, dressed similarly to Farmer Casey, is standing at the end of the alley. When she turns around, her face is disfigured.
"Frankie, you naughty pig! I never thought I'd find you,"
she screamed, eerily. Then, 4 men wearing animal masks appear behind her, and Frankie walks up to her.
"I knew I'd find you, farmer lady."
The child on the other side of the microphone was bawling into tears. Suddenly, the screen went static, and the camera cuts to the film set at the farm. There, the 5 men are brutally stabbing the actress who was playing Farmer Casey, while a young boy, who I think is the voice actor who played Frankie, watched. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Why would my parents even have this VHS? I decided to start watching again. What is the story of this strange film? There had to be some sort of explanation, so I did some more digging around on the company, Funbox Entertainment. Turns out they declared bankruptcy in 1994 because they hadn't made any money since 1992, the same year Frankie Pig Visits Niagara Falls supposedly came out. Other than that, nothing was out of the ordinary, just business stuff. Obviously I was missing something. The opening credits mentioned another company, Kidscape Distribution Canada, the people who distributed the film to retailers. A search for them turned up their website, which showed they were still distributing films. A phone number was provided here, so I called. The following is a rough transcription of what took place. Hey, this is Chris from Kidscape Distribution of Greater Toronto. How may I help you today? Hey Chris, I'd like to ask you some questions about one of the films you distributed. Yeah, sure. Which one? The old VHS kids cartoon. I think it's called Frankie Pig Visits Niagara Falls. Oh crap. I haven't heard of that. If you could leave your name and information, I'll get back to you when I can. Sorry. That's alright. I gave him a name, a number, and address. However, the information I left him was fake. The way he acted over the phone was way too suspicious. Soon after, I went back to the tape and watched further. After the stabbing scene on set was finished, the scene jumped back to Niagara Falls, where the animals are now carrying the other woman who is dressed as Farmer Casey. They walk her back onto Clifton Hill when police lights begin to flare. Again, the camera cuts to a scene of the falls at daytime, and all seems normal until a hand appears in front of the camera, gives a thumbs up, and some men in the background repeat, "Let's move, move, move." Then, the body of the other woman is seen being thrown into the falls. The camera is spun around to reveal more establishing shots of the city before a man starts singing children's nursery rhymes. It then resumes to the animated children's films I thought I would be watching. Frankie begins to regret leaving the other animals and begins to take action to find Farmer Casey and the gang, while also learning about the history and significance of the city of Niagara Falls. Then the credits began to roll, and this is when I got my notebook out. First and foremost, I needed to find out if the actor who portrayed Farmer Casey was ever murdered, the actor who portrayed Frankie was ever kidnapped, and if the director or someone at the studio ever got caught. But to my surprise, all the names were blurred out of the credits. This is when I went to the police. I drove over to the station and handed in the VHS, told them everything I knew. They told me they would do everything they could to find out the meaning of this tape. So that's it, you're thinking? That's all? No, that's not all. Before I posted this, something came up on the news. Remember the fake address I gave to the production company? Well, yesterday there was a fire at that location. A fire the police suspect to be arson. I think I'm onto something here. If any of you have ever seen this movie, or know something about it, or have even worked on it, please tell me about it. I need to know everything about this film. Is it just my copy that's like this? Do the events on the film correlate to anything in Niagara Falls? Help me out. Well, that's it for us at AHR. We hope you have enjoyed listening. Be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for more haunting tales.